Sangeetha. I want to do a very quick introduction as to why we held this panel today. The poetry community in Mysore was practically existing in the hearts of people, but I moved back to Mysore a couple of years ago and I felt like I did not have a space to share my love for poetry. And this tryst with poetry began about 7 months ago, where we collected and shared our love for poetry. And we all got together and we are on the stage today. I'm very happy about that. Welcome to all the panelists. They're all great poets. Also, Apoorva is published and most of us are not. We hope to be published. And we hope you like us enough to buy our books when we are. The session today is going to involve all of us reading out one poem that we've written and a small discussion as to why we write what we write. We'll begin with Apoorva, who's a sustainability professional and has been writing poetry for 19 years now. This is okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So this poem that I'm reading, it's something that I wrote quite recently. It stems from the latest existential crisis I've been having as a result of my profession. Where I see people harming the environment, and every day my job gets harder. Let me get started. I heave a sigh of relief to hide this bittersweet smile behind this impassive face as I look straight into the horizon from atop this mountain standing majestically tall. The storms take over the sea, sinking every ship and every boat. The sky is lit up with rage, like angry heavens cleaning up the many sins that we insignificant people have committed against Mother Earth, who has given her life, her beautiful soul, to nurture and protect every cell and every being for as long as she could fight. To see her broken wrenches my gut as I carry with me the guilt that mankind lacks for the atrocities we have burdened her with, every selfish deed to satisfy the egocentric needs of every dreadful human who worked only for their greed. Every morning I hear the news of every selfish act that is leading to our horrid end, and everything that we cannot do to stop the end from coming. My hope and faith waver with every fight I fight to protect this land we call home and every being in it. I grow tired every day as I shout and yell at the world, for I cannot do this alone. I see the defeated faces of every warrior standing beside me, with a desperate urge to lose the battle, to give this world a reboot. Perhaps it's better that way. I take a few breaths, listen to the voice inside, however feeble right now, that tells me to get up, dust myself off, and continue fighting till the end. I take a few more breaths, close my eyes, and bellow cries of war to defend this beautiful land until the end of time. Thank you. We'll come to you with questions once we're done listening to Tanishq and Ananya. We'll start with Tanishq. Tanishq has published 2 chapbooks. He's been writing poetry for 8 years now, and he's currently working on his own venture.
Hello. Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Sangeetha. So I'll dive right into the poem and we'll discuss the context after that. 362 days a year. There's something trying to escape my chest. A constant rhythm, a constant pounding. I do not feel normal. I don't feel a thing. I sleep in a bed, but I wake up in my sweat. I shiver by the fire, nightmares behest. I willingly wear shackles under arrest. Inside these walls, I still call a home. There's something trying to escape my chest. Dreams of freedom. My body is prison. On the 363rd day, I trekked to the top of this mammoth mountain, A crusade within, a journey through snow. The prisoner relents, the pounding slows. And so, I heave my body through the cold. There's a view from the top left to behold. It is day 364. I sit atop the peak, a weary soul. The pounding stops, there's a battle being fought. And for a moment, I'm alone with my thoughts. I remember that once I found a mongrel run to these heights, a common cur that brought me a stick. He was not lost, I was found. As I gaze upon this barren desert of white, there are no friends, only memories around. I do not remember his face, I only remember the stick. I learned that day, mirages don't arise from heat. All you need is a moment of desire, of compelled defeat. Day 365, I walk back down. I grab some wood along the way. I throw some sticks to the ground. I hope to be found. I hope to be found. There's no snow where I live. I do not live on a mountain. There's no warmth in the fire where I live. I do not live on a mountain. There are no friends where I live. I do not live on a mountain. There is no happiness where I live. There is no joy within. It's a new year, it's a new day, so they say. A pile of wood rots in my basement. I don't know what to do with it, I never have. I go through the motions of life foretold. Talk to people, do my chores, get to work, groceries from stores, but I still have wood rotting in my basement and I don't know what to do with it. I still have a pounding in my chest and I don't know what to do with it. So I sit in a chair and I pour a glass. Another 361 days to go. I still have wood to collect. Thank you.
That was lovely, Tanishq. I don't know if lovely is the word to describe it because now I feel a pounding in my chest and I don't know what to do about it. Thank you. We move to Ananya, who's 20 and who's currently pursuing her studies in architecture at the WCFA. She is a brilliant poet, as you will witness in a moment.
Hi everybody. One thing I never let myself do is take a coolie's help at a railway station. And the very first time I did, my knee was hurt and I had to. This poem is an account of that interaction. He was not the first to make fast towards me on that chaotic, crowded ground. But he stood just a little too close, and my legs, alas, were bound. He smelled like spirit and looked like everything you hate about a summer noon. Almost unrecognizable, not clad in red, his presence was yelling doom. He came to me, I knew the drill, he demanded that he help. Just as he'd go in for the kill, I'd insist I'd do it myself. 50, said he. I hadn't ever asked for help before, so I didn't know their fare. I had no yardstick for his ask, didn't know if it was fair. My knee was crumbling under me, my mind had to decide. It's only 50, I said to myself, and to him I said, all right. He swung each sack over his arms and sat the box down on his head, collected all the parts of himself in an instant, then he led. I'd walked this path 100 times, but never not alone. Although he stayed 2 steps behind, the path was suddenly his own. We walked, he talked, his arms all stalked. He asked me, what's your town? I swallowed my answer, bit my lip. I knew he'd seen me get down. He saw me get off, he saw where I was. I think I should not tell a lie. He holds all my things, he comfortably swings, waits patiently for my reply. My sir, I said, good job, knucklehead. Now this strange man knows too much. Me too, he exclaims, grinning under bursting wings. Did that one come in clutch? We crossed each track, we reached the back, his patience must have won. In a second, he doubled the number to which we'd both already sworn. I refused to comply, but perhaps too quiet. He said that he wouldn't pick a fight. I'll stick, said I, to 10 times 5. I saw disapproval flow from his eyes. No damn way, he finally did say. Think about how far we've come. I only ask enough for a flask. This simply isn't done. And in that instant, I forgot all he'd told me, some church in our town, some faint little story about where he'd come from and how he'd come before me. I couldn't give him more, and the thought simply tore me. But I stood my ground, guts and glory. I hunted for change, gave him all I could spare, and before he could count it, made hastily away. But he turned me around and stopped me anyway, looked at me in deep dismay. For all our journey together, I left on treachery train. Thank you.
Yeah, I told you good. We're going to give you a small break from poetry and listen to each of our panelists answer one question from me. We'll begin with Apoorva. Her book is titled In Conversation with the Universe, and I'm always fascinated by how poetry functions as a form of therapy. Would you like to talk about that? Is it therapeutic for you?
Oh, for sure. I think I converse better when I write rather than when I speak. That's why I'm extra nervous today because I'm better at writing than I can speak. Sometimes actually writing poetry also helps me understand what I'm feeling while I'm writing it. So, asking myself what I'm feeling or, how I actually feel, I figure it out when I'm writing. So that definitely adds a therapeutic value to it.
Can you recall a poem from your collection that reflects that?
There is one. I actually wrote that when I was 16. It's called The Greatest of Minds. There was a time when I was trying to understand my own self and what kind of a person I wanted to become. And that poem, I think, reflects a lot about that,
Yeah, so go buy her book and find out what 16-year-old Apoorva was thinking. Thank you for that. Ananya, my question to you is is more about structure. We've always heard that also most of the poetry we've read or been subjected to in our schools have been extremely long, also written by dead white men, and somehow very complex in nature. So when we come across something like poetry that only comes out mainly when it's rendered through audio, was it a conscious choice for you to choose to write this kind of poetry, or is it something that comes to you naturally?
To a large extent, it was definitely involuntary. Another close passion of mine is music, and I think that is one plug that I experience poetry through. And so the rhythmic component of it was it came very naturally to me, and that was what, if nobody will say it, I will. The Dr. Seuss type of poetry is what I like to write most.
You can forget Cat in the Hat. Nobody can forget Treachery Train, at least not me. Tanishq, I want to talk to you about vocabulary and how certain words matter when you're writing poetry.
Right, so that's actually a pretty good question. There's a principle called a rock is not a boulder. And it's pretty simple actually, because when you talk about a rock, you think of something that's hard, right? I would punch a rock, it would hurt me. But punching a boulder does not make as much sense. But a boulder instead reflects the idea of weight, something heavy, an obstacle, right? So likewise, in my poem, there's a sentence, I trekked to the top of this mammoth mountain. Instead of trek, I could have utilized walk or climb. But the image I wanted people to have was that of a long and difficult journey. And I think trek fits in there much better. It also gives me a nice alliteration with the T's, trek to the top, and I like that. So yeah, word choices do matter, and every poet has an individual style, depends on how they like it.
Yeah, so always, thank you for that. Not all word choices have to be complex. You don't have to be flowery when you write, but you definitely have to choose the right words. That's something I've learned. This is for Amulya. You will hear her render her poetry, and you will notice that it is somehow different in form, in that it combines image and text together. So you have to consume Amulya's poetry along with the images she chooses to put in your head. Why?
Well, I think I took to writing quite instinctively when I was in high school. And I say instinctively because I was just starting to recognize it as something I was enjoying and doing outside of classroom assignments. But my family and parents it didn't come as a surprise to them because my grandfather was a writer, so they were like, well, the genes had to go somewhere. So when I started writing, I think, now that I think about it, Wordsworth was on point when he defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of emotions. Because it was not a very conscious transfer of mind to paper, I was not capacitated enough to think about form and structure, rhyme and rhythm while writing it in its rawest form. So when I took to images, which happened fairly recently during the pandemic actually, when we were all cooped up in our homes, I was exploring how space works. It was exciting because as a visual thinker, I can't draw or paint, but photographs started as an extension of my mind that way. So while you can't say my text really adheres to the classical structure of poetry, I think coalescing image and text is an interesting exercise of it, because you're always thinking about placement and moving things around so that when you coalesce the two medium, you are thinking about how to present it to the readers, who also become viewers in the process. So I think that's why images and poetry have attracted me to it, and it's a medium that I'm still experimenting with. You will see more of it later. But yeah, that was my own.
Suspense. Wait and watch. And listen. Sayema, last question. In her poem, as you will listen, it's about myself. I've given it away, I'm sorry. How does poetry function as a chronicle of time and memory for you?
More than for me, first of all, poetry is primarily a lot of chronicling of time and memory itself. Whatever you're kind of trying to gather, it has to do with a certain set of memory associated with another or an experience in that form. But for me, how I look at it is that sometimes when you walk past some place, some street, and then there's a garbage dump in the corner, it becomes a part of your core memory, and then you liking or not liking is secondary about it. And then when you sit down and write, I think you can still romanticize that garbage dump. So I mean, with poetry, I think that's what you do, and that's how you capture memory, good or bad for that matter. And then it just becomes a part of your memory, and then you swing in a lot of people into it. I'm pretty sure everyone's seen a garbage dump for that matter. So then it is going to enlighten something within you. Ki, okay, I've seen this and this has happened. Whether it is a romantic memory, whether it is something sad, whether it is whatsoever it is, it's associated with something very physical at the same time, with a physical space, with a very physical sense that we have. So, I don't feel that's the way of me.
Great. Okay. We will see you substantiated with your poetry in just a bit. We're moving to Amulya's poetry now. If you could put up the images. Do you want to start? I'm short enough for
So I'll preface this by saying I am no photographer. I don't even own a camera for that matter. These were all shot on my phone. I took the images that you will see on a little road trip that we took last year while I was scooped up in the last seat at the back in my aunt's SUV. The words came later. This one's called "The Ground Underneath Me is Moving." Looking for a center, I think of escape. The shape it takes, clear, sweet shop windows and the feeling of flying in the fifth gear. On good days, like a kid in the backseat, I search for more sky, for rain and clouds that endlessly shift shape and water. Behind closed doors, I gathered the dots I have let run off. This year, I only aim to get the point across. No frills, don't over-involve, putting your hand, your head, your heart where they don't belong. On other days, I drift, settling as a footnote, waiting for my freedom to arrive, second-handed and twice removed. In my own company, I become a mimic, always searching for a show. In a city that is nobody's home, I become a city no one calls home. Maybe the great escape isn't a one-way train ticket at the tail end of 10 o'clock, or feet paddling through the night towards a dawn-breaking horizon as if time is water and swimming is muscle memory. The ground underneath me is moving. Counting days by the light's exits, this mind knows no curfews. On some days, my sun sets at 2, On some days, it does not set at all. So I sit, with my eyes shut, not knowing the difference. I've been in this state for a while now, not knowing, not making a difference. I breathe, but only to know how long my breath can stretch. Till the end of this sentence, till the end of this unending city. Maybe one day, I will collect all my self-sanctioned stories and put a pin down on all the places my center can be. Maybe then, my freedom, my escape will find its way to me. Thank you.
Then you said that to the end of this sentence, it reminds me of this book by Octavio Paz, in which he writes, in the Monkey Grammarian, he writes, by the time I'm done writing this sentence, this entire meaning will have changed. And I think there's a lot to be said about language and its beauty, but there's also a lot to be said about misconceptions around poetry, which is one thing we're not aiming to tackle it, but I think just by existing and reading very different kinds of poetry, we've been dealing with that question. That was a lead up to my poem. It's called This Kind of Poetry. I have to stand, I'm sorry. I can't sit and read it. It begins this way. Why do you write this kind of poetry? Is a question I always get asked. Poems that have no rhyme or reason, that do not invoke the past with nostalgia. Poems that are not pretty. My poetry is ugly because I am ugly. I write poetry because I think ink might wane the pain of holding my tongue and caging my mind. I write poetry because it is everything that I am not. It is everything that I hope to be. It is the sarcophagus of my soul. It is the whisper of a kind word in a world drunk on hate. It is a desperate attempt to feel, to stop, to listen. It is a dream waiting to be dreamt. I write this kind of poetry because it demands to be written. It is the shrill screams of a dying violin, the bottled essence of a hospital bed, the dull ache you carry to your grave. Aesthetics is for those that sleep at night, who are not haunted by all things they could never be, by the plasticity of their lives and the fickleness of their memories. I do not have the time to heed to style, to rhyme. A-B, A-B. I do not write for you. I write because there's nothing else I can do. I write poetry with a faint hope that verse might succeed where theory has failed. We thought it would be a great way to end the poetry session with the poem from Sayema that talks about nostalgia and Mysuru.
Good evening, everyone. So, I recently turned 25, so now I hold my back, and when I see 18-year-olds, I roll my eyes and call them kids. I'm new to nostalgia. Now slightly old, I know for a fact there's someone older. Sorry, I ruled the world when I was younger. I didn't quite acknowledge an elder. And I'm new to nostalgia and newer to its narration. I'll speak of 3 places that make Mysore, Mysore to me. My parents took me to Mysore Palace every Sunday. And every Sunday I waited as the lights reflected my once perfect, fully dilated eyeballs. I don't remember being stopped or beeped through metal frames or seeing blobs of yellows in restricting barricades. There wasn't any list of how to exist in a perfectly functional public space. I don't remember what road we took or the traffic scenes. I was too busy with the moon endlessly following me. See, I'm new to nostalgia. Pardon me as I'm blurry with my details. My eyes are now myopic. I guess my memories are too. All of high school, I commuted in buses. And the waiting and bickering and rushing for change blessed me with patience enough to date men. So now, to get to wherever, I had 2 points of exchange. One was city bus stand, the other suburban bus stand, famously known as Sabr. Now, if you haven't joined the dots yet, Sabr in Urdu is patience, rightly so. If the bus didn't go to Sabr, it would stop at R gate. Now, I always wondered what this R stood for. It wasn't Devaraja, it wasn't Jayachamrajendra, wasn't Krishna Raja. Looking at the point of confluence, I concluded the R was for Raja. And spent the rest of the ride thinking of Raj. Well, I was born the year DDLJ released, what did you expect? Pardon me, I'm new to nostalgia, so I'll take some time to stick the things I started talking about. So one day I board a bus, well over its capacity. I stand at the front door near the driver's seat. The driver, who I went on to befriend, a white-bearded skull-cap guy, asked me where I was off to. I said Sabr, and he replied, "Wahan nahi jati maa ye bus, sir. 6 gate ke paas chhod da tu." There it was. The bulb flickered, and that was an epiphany. Our gate was 6 gates. That day I was late to wherever I was headed to because I walked the perimeter to count. Speaking finally of a long-lost dead house that my aunt lived in on the Banimantab main road, where my mother and I walked to through Balbhavan, also now long-lost and dead. And with a good rhythm of walking and pausing to play, we'd get to the main road. Crossing the roads was easier back then. I just said back then. Anyways, my aunt's house was huge. But unlike today, a huge house back then was not synonymous with a tall one. It was the width of that dining table intimidated me. And their living room could accommodate 3 separate conversations without confluence. But my favorite part was not on the inside. It was a curved staircase outside that went up to I don't know where. There was a door at the end of it. I never went inside. But that staircase was a playground, a bench to nap on, a great place to hide or even cry at times, to watch Dasara processions or simply photosynthesize. All I needed was that open space in front of that house and a set of 20-odd steps to weave memories uniquely nostalgic. This city means many things to many. To me, Mysuru is a home and also the road leading to it.
And with that was great. And with that, we bring a wrap to the session. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for entertaining us. Please come and share the love of poetry. We'd like nothing more. Thank you.
That was it.